Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. This is our second to last class of our season. Then we're going to take a summer slash high holy day hiatus for August and September and the beginning of October, and we'll return October 21st. So next week is our last August 5th. Or whatever it is, the Tuesday of the first week of August. Yep, the 5th. That's our last class of this session. Of course, all of the classes are recorded, and if you missed any, you can go back and watch them. Um, okay. This morning we are looking at Psalm 64.
50.
And I like many of the Psalms in the 50s and 60s, Psalm 64 is not used in the Jewish liturgical tradition. So we're gonna treat this psalm like a poem and really dive deep into the meaning, look at a couple of the different Hebrew phrases. I'm not sure if we'll have to see how the conversation goes. I'm not sure if we'll have enough to last a whole hour, but we'll go until we don't have anything else to say about the psalm or whatever, and then we'll close out. So like usual, we'll read the psalm out loud in Hebrew and then in a couple of different translations. And our first pass through, what we're looking for is what is the emotional experience of reading this psalm? And the corollary to that is what emotional experience do you think the poet of this psalm, the Paitan, the person who wrote this psalm, what do you think they were experiencing that caused them to write this particular song? So I'll share my screen. So
Can you move it closer? No, no, no. Okay.
should be able to see the psalm, and I'll read first in Hebrew and then in translation. Lamanatseach mizmor LaDavid. Shema Elohim koli b'sichi mipachad oyev titzor chayai. Tasdireni misod mireim merigshat poale aven. Asher shananu kacherev lishonam darchu chitzam davar mar. Lirot b'mistarim tam pitom yoruhu velo yirau. Yichazku lamo davar ra yisapru litmon mokshim amru mi yir'eh lamo. Yachpesu olot tamnu chefes mechupas v'kerev ish v'lev amok. Vayorem Elohim chetz pitom hayu makotam. Vayachshiluhu alemo lishonam yitnodedu kol ro'e vam. Vayiru kol adam vayagidu po'al Elohim Umasehu hiskilu yismach tzadik badonai v'chasavo v'yitalalu kol yishrei lev. For the director of music, a psalm of David. Hear me, my God, as I voice my complaint. Protect my life from the threat of the enemy. Hide me from the conspiracy of the wicked, from the plots of evildoers. They sharpen their tongues like swords and aim cruel words like deadly arrows. They shoot from ambush at the innocent. They shoot suddenly, without fear. They encourage each other in evil plans. They talk about hiding their snares. They say, who will see it? They plot injustice and say, we have devised a perfect plan. Surely the human mind and heart are cunning. But God will shoot them with his arrows. They will suddenly be struck down. He will turn their own tongues against them and bring them to ruin. All who see them will shake their heads in scorn. All people will fear. They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what he has done. The righteous will rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. All the upright in heart will glory in him. For the leader, a psalm of David. Hear my voice, O God, in my complaint. Preserve my life from the terror of my enemy. Hide me from the counsel of evildoers, from the tumult of the workers of iniquity, who have whet their tongue like a sword and have aimed their arrow, a poisoned word, that they may shoot in secret places at the blameless. Suddenly do they shoot at him, and fear not. They encourage one another in an evil matter. They converse of laying snares secretly. They ask who would see them. They search out iniquities. They have accomplished a diligent search, even in the inward thought of every one and the deep heart. But God doth shoot at them with an arrow suddenly. Thence are their wounds. So they make their own tongue a stumbling unto themselves. All that see them shake the head. All men fear, they declare the work of God and understand his doing. The righteous shall be glad in the Lord and shall take refuge in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory.
Hmm.
I'll read one more. For the conductor, a psalm of David. God, hear my voice in my murmuring. Save my life from the terror of my enemy. Shelter me from the secret plot of evildoers, from the raging of the doers of iniquity, who have put their tongue in their teeth like a sword, who have aimed their arrow, an acrid word, to shoot an innocent in sheltered places. They shoot suddenly, shameless and secure. They support each other with a wicked word. They tell tales of secret traps. They wink. Who would see them? They search for corrupt actions. We have completed the most searching search that to the inmost human parts, to the deepest heart. Then God shoots an arrow at them. Suddenly the wounds are theirs. They turn their tongue into a trap for themselves. All who look at them shake their heads. Then everyone shamed is afraid as they narrate the work of God and grow wise through your works. Let the just rejoice in Adonai. Let them take refuge in you, and all who are upright of heart will be praised. So, first reactions, thoughts. Yeah, Mark,
My first thought was we should be thankful that Trump doesn't write Psalms.
tell me more.
It's just that it seems like David is complaining about the stream media. That people are talking about him, and he's railing against the rumors and the whatevers. That was just my first immediate thought. I
Great.
apologize for my irreverence.
So, Mark points out a couple of things here. I'm going to paraphrase what you said. First, there's something about this complaint in this psalm that feels extraordinarily modern and relevant, right? Sometimes the complaints in the psalm feel like they're coming to us from another time and place. You know, it's all about enemies without and fighting swords and uh marching around the walls of the city, and like there are complaints in the Psalms that feel ancient, and we can still learn from them, we can still connect to them, we can still think about them metaphorically, right? We have seldom found a psalm that we didn't connect anything to. But something about the description of the words as arrows, something about the the riotous mob of evildoers who are just trying to speak badly about me, right? Something about the complaint of this psalm feels so modern that we could imagine a modern king or a modern ruler saying these words, like the lamestream media is coming after me. Okay, and so there's it feels really modern. And the other thing that you pointed out is uh aside from its the modern aspect of it, is that this psalm uh, shifts the kind of enemy that we're talking about. This is not a psalm about physical danger. It's a psalm about treachery and secretiveness and opponents with rumors and barbed words. That is that's part of what makes it feel modern, but also I think it's really important to note that the type of enemy that David is dealing with in this psalm is different from some of the enemies that he's been dealing with in the previous psalms leading up to this one. Great. Yeah, Mark.
It sounds to me like his poll numbers are down, and he's lamenting the fact that he's getting this bad publicity from somebody, and this is his way of fighting back, apparently.
Yeah. Propaganda, slander, rumor, anonymity, right? Like somebody's writing things on the internet, but who can tell who that is, right? The 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 rumors, they don't come with a specific person that's spreading those rumors. It's just a diffuse sense of rumors are out there, right? That the enemy is very hard to put, like that story of the guy who spread all those rumors and then is told by the rabbi to collect the feathers from his pillow, and you can't put rumors back, just like you can't recollect the feather pillow that has been, spread out. You know the story I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, Murray.
Well, I think partially you've touched on it. Mark has touched on it. My first reaction is that of two thoughts, actually. On one hand, this is a paragon who sets himself up as the righteous one, and the and all the things that it does and says are in praise of God and correct. But on the other hand, there is the bit of paranoia. There is it that bad that everyone around is just evil? They're all aiming their arrows at this individual, and that person has a bit of a problem there to come out with some way of joining the community. The person is outside of the community and condemns the whole community. That's a little bit too broad a brushstroke.
Nice. Murray points out that that there's um the the foe is in his anonymousness, in his it could be anyone. It's a huge, broad foe. It's very scary. A tenuousness on when you know who the enemy is, you can call them out by name, right? And we saw some of those Psalms where it was, here's what David said after Saul did this, or here's what David said after finding out about the treachery of so and so, or here, but here it's a very diffuse, broad strokes kind of enemy. Larry.
Building on that, I agree with Murray. But what it seems to be is this is referring to cosmic forces that operate in people rather than people themselves. It's operating through people, but these principles are uh, cause people to think they are more than they are and have more wisdom and cunning than they do. And the very weapons with which evil attacks you is the weapon with which evil will be defeated. That the principle of good and righteousness uses whatever it is that is dug up by the evil one, and it happens to them. That it's almost a principle of opposition, force, opposition, equity, resolution. It seems really kind of theological here rather than referring to a specific plot, although it plays
The,
itself out in those.
the enemies described here aim venomous words like arrows, right? They are using words as a weapon, but the weapon that they're using words as is an arrow. And it's not a coincidence that the psalmist describes God as striking them with God's arrow, right? So they are trying to use words like an arrow, and God strikes them with an arrow. Now, I get the sense that God's arrow is not words, right? That God's arrow has more physicality to it. That like, so I don't know, right? But then the next verse, their own tongue shall trip them up. They're going to end up facing the consequences of their own words. I think that very much fits with Larry's point here, right? So we get both the theological aspect. They shoot arrows made of words, and God shoots an arrow at them. They're gonna be taken down by the same thing, but also their own tongues, which they're using to produce the words, they are going to be they're going to be tripped up by their own tongues. Diana.
Hi, I'm Rosalie's sister. So
Yeah, you joined us last week.
yes, thank you. Um, is there any justification in understanding or extrapolating from this psalm to is Israel? I feel very involved with what's happening with Israel, and um, so as if David stands himself for the state of Israel. That was the way I mean, I immediately read this as a metaphor for what's happening now. Um, any
Or
justification in making that jump, or are we really just talking about King David or individuals?
well, I definitely think that you're justified in like understanding the psalm in a way that is relevant to your own life and to the experience that you're having in the world right now. Right? I think that's part of why we read Psalms. The ancient poetry speaks to themes, it helps us to share our thoughts. It is both a mirror, a reflection of our own. It's a mirror of our own lives, but also it it shapes our understanding of the world, right? That's part of, why the rabbis say in times of distress, read Psalms, because the wisdom of Psalms helps us to understand the world that we are living in. And certainly, in some sense, there's a real uh, comfort in knowing that the problems that we have are not new to us, right? We might think that the problem of propaganda, that the problem of lies, that the problem of blood libel, right? The problem of a misunderstanding of historical context, right? We might think that those problems are completely modern, but our psalmist in Psalm 64 is dealing with the same kind of problem: lies, propaganda, slander. The enemies are saying things that aren't true. and it's really hard to fight that. It's really hard to fight
Mhm.
slanderous lies. So I'm not sure exactly what you meant by this makes you feel like Israel right now. But when I read news reports that report without any question
Mhm.
uh the uh the casualty rates and the starvation rates that are reported by the Gaza Health Ministry, which is a subsidiary of a terrorist organization called Hamas. And read that the New York Times just accepts their numbers with no caveats, right? I feel the way that David feels in this psalm. Like there are all these liars out there, and you're just believing the lies and the propaganda. On the other hand, this week, B'Tselem, which is the most prominent, largest human rights organization in Israel, right? An Israeli human rights organization. They, for the last 18 months or whatever, have pushed back against the idea that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. But this week they came forward and said there have been enough statements of genocidal intent by Israeli ministers in the government, right? Where Israeli ministers have come out and said, we'll just starve them into some submission, right? If we starve them enough, then they'll go away. The problem will solve itself, right? Enough Israeli ministers have said stuff like that in public, in the press, that B'Tselem is no longer comfortable saying that this isn't a genocide, right? Because genocide requires intent, and there are enough Israeli ministers who have said things that feel enough like genocidal intent that they're unwilling to continue to defend the actions of the state of Israel. Now, on the one hand, right, Hamas Health Ministry clearly is lying, right, and that's been documented. And right, Israel is letting aid into Gaza, and the UN is the one that's failing to properly distribute it, and yet Israel is getting blamed for it. Right? On the other hand, B'Tselem has a point that that they are a very serious organization, and they are unwilling to the Jewish people in the latter half of the 20th century and right have spent the last 80 years saying when the enemies of the Jewish people say something, believe them. Well, how can we not apply that same standard to ourselves? To ourselves. Are we not supposed to believe the Israeli government ministers when they say things that seem genocidal? Like, are we just supposed to say, "Oh, that's an exaggeration"? Like, no. If we're gonna apply that same standard to the enemies of the Jewish people, right? Believe them when they say that they want to do this, then we also have to apply it to the ministers of the current Israeli government. I I find B'Tselem's argument there to be a, a challenging but reasonable argument. And I think it connects to this same idea, right? The words are out there, and people are going to stumble and fall because of their own words. And that is true of the enemies of the Jewish people, and it's also true of the Jewish people.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of forces within the Jewish people to create our own dramas and contradictions and arguments. I mean, I take exception with B'Tselem, but you know, they're very prominent and they get quoted a lot by the enemies of Israel. The
Yes,
enemies of
that's true.
Israel just
Also,
love that stuff. So,
yeah,
like,
also when you look at where B'Tselem is funded from, then you start to see a pattern where, well, it's actually funded by the enemies of Israel. So it is able to have this cachet because it's an Israeli NGO, but it's also funded by a lot of the same the same money sources that are saying the other thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
what I'm
I
finding,
acknowledge that
yeah,
too. I acknowledge that too.
okay. Yeah, I mean, what I find with them is they they don't provide enough context. I know people use context, the word context, in so many ways to destroy arguments and moral positions, and um, I don't know. It's a really difficult problem, and um, I just feel when I really like this psalm because I do have this feeling of Israel under attack at the very moment when it's stronger than it's ever been.
Mm,
Finally, it has a chance to um, make its enemies, if not vanquish, submit, because these are enemies who are implacable. Um, and I don't know if enough people understand that. And I hear a lot of terrible things, what from to me are terrible, from Jewish people who are blaming Israel and blaming Jews for speaking up and so on. And there's going to be ministers like that in Israel. In a democracy, you're not going to speak with one voice. You're going to have all kinds of voices.
yeah,
Anyway, this psalm really resonated.
resonates. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do think that the Psalm, as we said, right at the beginning, as Mark pointed out, this Psalm feels extremely modern, right? Mark put it into an American context with Trump and Trump's fear of the deep state, right? But I think you could understand it in the context of the modern state of Israel and the enemies of the Jewish people just as well, and regarding the B'Tselem report, I too take exception to it's heartbreaking to me that that the that that the Jewish people aren't unified in Jewish pride, that the Jewish people aren't unified in an understanding of Jewish self-defense, and also it is Jewish values that is also underlying the at least some of the people at B'Tselem and what they're trying to do, and they are also speaking out of a sense of their profound truth of Jewish identity, and I respect that too. And it is true that there are ministers of this current Israeli government who have said things that are extremely outrageous. And as I said to somebody else in my office yesterday, I have cousins in the IDF, and I have faith that the command structure of the Israeli Defense Force, that the IDF is a defense force, that it is not actively trying to kill innocent people. And I really believe that. I've seen that firsthand. I have heard firsthand accounts. I really believe that. And even if the IDF and the command structure of the IDF is not acting in a way which is, um, well, certainly not genocidal, but even if it's not acting in a way which is uh, too sloppy, right? Like the IDF is, I think, as pure as it can be, and it's still a war, and wars are terrible. Uh, the you know the civilian government says what it says, and that is a part of the story. In a democracy, we're all responsible for the actions of the government, and so I also feel that I it's a big tension. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the way that this psalm also resonates in that tension. Murray.
First of all, just a quick comment. I never considered B'Tselem to be a neutral broker, so to speak.
No, it's not really.
Right. Now, apropos what Diana had pointed out, I think this psalm can be placed in the same light. Here's Israel, who considers itself to be the righteous, the doing everything by the book. When what it has done is it has defended itself. It has helped defend the world. It was attacked in 1948 in its formation, and it had repelled the enemy. It again repelled again later on, 67, and then in 73, and then Israel had destroyed the nascent Iraqi nuclear ambitions, and now destroyed Iran and freed from the threat the entire region and possibly the entire globe. And what does Israel get? Is a slings and arrows without context about a particular situation, without knowing the facts, and not even comparing to battles of the past, the world battles, whether World War I or World War II, when huge numbers of civilians were killed, but only few numbers of the not so, but large numbers also of the soldiers, but fewer than in Israel. In Israel, when they bomb because they have no choice, their IDF forces are killed as well, and the numbers are far greater because of that. And yet the world does not recognize it. It continues the old shoots, and they think someday, righteousness will prevail.
Yeah, thank you. Alba.
Okay, I have all these tangents coming out of my brain. Since I live here in Valencia, Spain, I have noticed, these are my notes, I have noticed that as a kind of a caveat that I don't live there, so much of what you guys say, I don't understand. I've been trying to catch up with the political situation in the United States on the YouTubes and the comedy things like Colbert and stuff like that. And I'm beginning to find it interesting that most of the best information I get is from comedians, talking about stuff. But that's neither here nor there. And the other thing is, I'm pretty sure I don't speak English anymore. But words are a weird thing. That the words we use, if they're going to be like bows and arrows and stuff like that, you have to pick the words that are going to push your buttons or push somebody else's buttons. And so, like, if you sling enough words at a person, you might actually hit a word that gets a reaction. One of the things I watched was Mr. Obama, and he's been the butt of I don't know how many weird things. And he manages to just keep his equanimity and just lets it roll off him like water off the back of a duck. So, when someone throws a flurry of arrows at you, if they have no meaning to you and you know that these words have no meaning, there's no reason for you to react. I'm not sure sometimes if the reaction is for you or for somebody else. I don't know. I don't even know what I just said, but something like that. And then the other things, I even wrote down sticks and stones. Uh, you know, sticks and stones will break my bones, names will never hurt me, that kind of junk. And my dad used to say, may he rest in peace, that you give somebody enough rope, they'll hang themselves with it. But I think that has more to do with the book of Esther than this right now. But the idea is, if somebody is throwing arrows at you, it will come back. There will come a moment when Horatio, I do believe you protest too much. You know, there's that thing from Shakespeare with, I'm pretty sure it's Shakespeare, where you protest so much that people begin to think, why are you saying all these words? Evidently, there's another something behind them that's making you say things that you've gone too far with these words, and they're just going to come back at you. Yeah, I think I've just said about everything that was in my head. I didn't even know if
Yes,
it's
but
connected to what we were talking about,
I think
but
you talked a little bit about the way that words can sometimes be virtue signaling, right?
yeah, yeah.
That maybe people are um maybe people are only they're not saying the words because they really believe them, but they're saying the words because they think that they're the words that you're supposed to say in this context. You know, they're virtue signaling through their words. And you also talked about how sometimes in a world where truth is so um, hard to pin down, uh,
Mm.
where comedians sometimes seem to be telling the real truth in a way that uh, the news isn't, which that's a challenging place to be in. And then you pointed out that sometimes, you know, a person in fact denies or uh, uh, the thing that a person gets the most upset about might in
Mm.
fact be a thing that they're insecure about that actually being the case. And that's
Mm.
the question, this aspect of doth protest too much. Yeah, Larry.
The end of this psalm, I think, puts light on the rest of it, that we've all been talking about what humans should do in response to this and this and this. And this is that all men shall fear and shall declare the work of God, for they shall wisely consider of his doing. The righteous shall be glad in the Lord and shall trust in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory. There seem to be two powerful thoughts in here about these forces which act. It says, don't try to solve this yourself. First, make sure your heart is upright, that your motives are pure, and they never will be totally pure, but work it, man, work it. Get it, beat the bad stuff out of it and get yourself as pure as possible. And then ask God, put it in God's hands. Don't try to do it yourself. God is real and powerful, more powerful than opposition, than the evil one, the Abaddon. So there's something eternal about this, with eternal principles of how you deal with calumny, how you deal with the hidden snakes. It's stop trying to fix it yourself. First, take a look at yourself, get yourself straight, then ask God to intervene. And all the upright in heart shall glory.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting and goes to what you're talking about in verse 6, uh the um the enemies are telling tales of secret traps, right? That they're telling tales, they're speaking. And in verse 10, um they're telling tales of God's works. And so in fact, just as the enemies of the Jewish people are going to get tied up in their tongues, right? The response to bad stories is good stories or true stories, the stories of the works of God. And so, you know, their stories are stories of rebellion, but our stories are stories of praise of God's works, and so you can combat stories with stories. Other thoughts? Alba?
I'm a real book and movie girl, but with W.C. Fields, oops, it disappeared. Oh,
Oh,
okay,
sorry.
there it is. Something happened. W.C. Fields said you can't cheat an honest man. And so, like, if you really do believe in the justice of God, and you really do believe that there is justice, you just have to kind of, you know, figure where it is and smoke it out. Um, there there is no way that somebody can undo you, no matter how horrible the words may be, if you can't be cheated. I mean, you can't cheat an honest man. If you ask someone to be honest about what they feel, then and it's supported by Torah, then that other person or other group or other whatever can just rattle on for days on end, and it's not going to change a whole lot. I was watching the movie Man of the Year with Robin Williams, and watching Robin Williams, the movie was done in like 2009 maybe, and it's incredible. It's exactly what I'm hearing 20 years later. It's exactly the same thing. Nothing seems to change. It gets a little worse, or more pointed, but it's exactly the same as it was. I mean, like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. So I can't seem to see. I just think Mr. Trump is evil. He's just plain evil. That's all I can see, actually. Yeah.
Marcia, did you have something you wanted to say?
That was a sigh. My goodness.
Marcia,
Yes.
did you have something you wanted to say?
No, no.
No. Okay. You leaned forward like maybe you had something you wanted to say. So all right. So I really like the spiritual applications section of Rabbi Richard Levy's book. So we'll move to that section. He writes, "This psalm reminds us that words can be as deadly as arrows. As we are hurt by others' sharp words, so can our sharp words hurt others. It is important to ask whether God, the author of language, is speaking in the hurtful words of others. The nature of the arrows that God sends against the poet's enemies is not revealed. But before we lash out at the cruel words of others, we need to ask, are these words that God wants me to hear? Am I to learn something from others' hurtful language? Or am I to seek comfort as a result of it from God and from my friends? Sometimes we may feel that there are hard words God wants our loved ones to hear from us. This is an awesome responsibility to search out whether these might be God's words or originating in ulterior motives of our own. If we conclude the former, we need to channel the words of God in a way that others can hear them and accept them. But this psalm also describes people hostile to God experiencing a breakthrough, finding their lips, which had delighted in stories of rebellion to God, now forming stories of God's great deeds. Sometimes, when we see such a changeover in people, we become skeptical, cynical even, jealous perhaps that they have joined our ranks. We need to reject such arrogant attitudes in ourselves and learn to praise God for the transformations the Holy One has wrought in others. And rather than waiting for them to fall into a trap again, to rejoice with them and help them remain steadfast. Certainly, we want others to support us when we are the ones who have changed our lives. I think this goes to what we've been talking about this whole time, which is that, as Larry pointed out, the way the words are both the problem and the solution, both the cause of the enmity and the potentially the cause of a renewed relationship. Both the 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 rebelliousness is through language, through words, but also the return to God and to telling God stories is through words, through the way that we speak and tell the stories. And I think that Rabbi Levy's a point that sometimes the words that we hear that are criticism of us, sometimes those words are not just arrows from enemies, but sometimes they are God's arrows that are channeled through our loved ones, through our enemies, through our experiences. Sometimes there are words that we need to hear in order to bring us to an acknowledgement of our own failings so that we can move toward our best self. And sometimes we too channel God's arrows, God's words to our loved ones when we try to share with them ways in which we think that they need to change. And this poem, this psalm reminds us that we can't just assume that all of the words of the enemies um, are wrong or incorrect. We have to also be willing to understand that some of those words might, in fact, be also from God. Very
Hmm?
powerful. Yeah, Alba.
Yeah, my Aunt Miriam is 104 and still has all of her marbles. She's incredible. And my mother's 96. And both of them are just as sharp as tacks. And one time they were telling me that you want to know who you are? Listen to your kids, because God channels everything you are through your kids. They'll just throw it right back at you, especially if they're like 5 or 6 years old. And so, like, if you just listen to them play, you'll hear who you are, coming back at you. And so that idea of God channels words through various conduits. This they both said at different times that listen to your kids, you'll hear yourself.
Does that still work when they're in their 50s?
Probably.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and it was Country Joe and the Fish. They are between 80 and 100. They did the show with Bob Dylan. I heard it, Berkeley.
Other
It's still
thoughts?
hot where you guys are. The heat here broke. That's why you can see me and I'm not sitting here naked because it's so damn hot. The heat went down, but I don't know what's going on. I think someone's plucking a chicken somewhere because there's bird feathers all over the damn place. They keep blowing in here. And downstairs, they're doing in the summertime, downstairs on the ground floors, there's a school down there, and they're doing this major remodeling, and all this, sheetrock dust is blowing up with a bunch of feathers. And I can't quite figure out, is this the time when birds molt or something? because I don't know where all the bird feathers are coming from. I know where the dust is coming from, but bird feathers? What is that?
I don't know. Um, any other comments about the psalm? All right. Well, thank you everybody for this wonderful engagement with Psalm 64. Next week we'll do Psalm 65. Uh, Psalm 65 actually does have some interesting uh, liturgical uses. There's a verse from Psalm 65 that's a very important verse in the Brit Milah ceremony, the circumcision. So we'll talk about that and about how that connects to the overall theme of the psalm. I'm not sure that it does. We'll have to look and see. And so hopefully I'll get the the sheets out to you tomorrow or Thursday. All
Grant,
right.
how is Mishkalov doing?
Oh, she's okay. She it's like a bit of a up and down.
She's still in Dutch, Sarah?
No,
Is she home?
I think she's home.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
We'll give her a call later. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
See you
you.
next week.
See you next week.